Hi everyone, I'm Deborah Messing and honestly, I'm not even sure where to begin. I'm 33 years old, doing well in my marketing career, and thought I had finally figured out how to manage all the drama in my family. But everything took a turn when my younger sister, Janet, started planning her wedding. I wanted nothing more than to help her create the perfect day, but I quickly realized it was going to be way more complicated than I had anticipated. The biggest shadow looming over the entire event was our dad, Jeremy. Ever since his divorce, he hasn't been the same. He's been struggling, slipping deeper into a cycle of drinking and making poor choices. And, in my opinion, one of the worst choices he's made is his new girlfriend, Julie. From the moment I met her, I couldn't shake this uneasy feeling. Something about her just didn't sit right with me. One afternoon, while Janet and I were at a flower shop picking out arrangements, she suddenly turned to me, her face clouded with worry. "Deborah, do you think Dad will actually show up sober?" she asked, her voice soft but tinged with desperation. I took a deep breath, trying to stay optimistic for her sake. "I really hope so," I said, forcing a smile. "For your sake, Janet, I truly do." But deep down, I wasn't so sure. Hoping for the best didn't feel like enough, and the closer we got to the wedding day, the more I felt like I wasn't just her maid of honor. I was becoming a full-time peacekeeper. My boyfriend, Aaron, was a rock through it all. He always knew how to calm me down when I was spiraling. "Babe, you can't control everything," he'd remind me gently whenever I got too worked up. I know, I'd reply, though in my heart, the worry wouldn't let me rest. I couldn't help thinking, if Dad ruins Janet's wedding, I'll never forgive him. But as stressful as everything already was, I had no idea things were about to get even worse. About a week before the wedding, I met up with my best friend, Christina, for coffee. Christina has always been my go-to for advice, the voice of reason I desperately needed. I spilled everything to her, hoping she could help me untangle the mess in my head. "What's really going on with you and Julie?" Christina asked, raising an eyebrow as she leaned closer. Her tone told me she already suspected something was up. I glanced around nervously, lowering my voice as if someone might overhear us. "There's just something off about her, Christina," I admitted. The way she latched onto Dad so quickly, how she's always whispering things to him. And get this, one night, I overheard Julie on the phone talking about some big score she was planning. Her tone was low and secretive, and my gut immediately twisted. Christina's eyes widened as I shared this with her. "You think she's scamming your dad?" she asked, her voice sharp with concern. "I don't know," I admitted, "but I'm going to find out." That conversation lit a fire in me. I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something wasn't right, and I needed answers. Late at night, after work, I found myself scrolling through Julie's social media, trying to connect the dots. I even made quiet calls to a few of Dad's old friends, hoping they might shed some light on her sudden presence in his life. The deeper I dug, the more uneasy I felt. It was like piecing together a puzzle, but I wasn't sure I wanted to know what picture would emerge once it was complete. The day before the wedding, Janet and I were at the venue doing some final checks. The decorations were coming together beautifully, and for a moment, I let myself relax. But that calm shattered when Dad and Julie showed up unannounced. "Daddy," Janet squealed, running to him with open arms. Her joy was palpable, but my heart sank the moment I saw him. His smile was sloppy, his words slurred. He was already drunk. Julie, on the other hand, looked composed, too composed. Her sharp eyes darted around the room like she was sizing everything up. "Andre, darling," she purred, wrapping her arm around him, "let's go check out the bar." She glanced at me with a smug, knowing expression before leading him away. Anger boiled inside me, but I swallowed it for Janet's sake. I turned to her just as her happy expression faltered, tears welling up in her eyes. "Deborah," she started, her voice trembling. I pulled her into a tight hug before she could say anything else. "Don't worry, sis," I whispered firmly. "Tomorrow is about you and Patrick. Nothing is going to ruin it." But deep down, I wasn't so sure. They say there's always a calm before the storm, and ours was brewing. Little did I know, it would hit with the force of a hurricane. The The wedding ceremony itself was breathtaking. Janet looked absolutely radiant in her gown, her face glowing with happiness as she exchanged vows with Patrick. For a brief, shining moment, it felt like all the chaos had melted away. Watching her up there, I let myself hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could get through this day without any major disasters. But that fragile hope didn't last. The moment we walked into the reception, my stomach dropped. There he was, Dad, standing by the bar, drink in hand, with Julie clinging to his arm like she was afraid to let go. His face was flushed, and his laughter was far too loud. It was painfully obvious that he was drunk again. Aaron, who had been by my side all day, leaned in close, his voice soft. "You okay?" he asked, sensing my tension. I clenched my fists, trying to steady my breathing. "I've got to hold it together for Janet," I muttered, forcing a tight smile. But inside, I was raging. All I wanted was for Janet to have the perfect day she deserved. But as I watched Dad stumble over to a group of guests, sloshing his drink and laughing too loudly, I knew the storm was about to break. And it wasn't going to be pretty. I forced a smile, muttering reassurances, but deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before things went completely off the rails. The tension in the room thickened as the evening wore on. Dad's laughter became louder, his movements sloppier, and Julie's eyes darted around the venue with a gleam that made my stomach twist. Something felt deeply wrong, and I couldn't shake the unease. "Deborah," Janet whispered, tugging on my arm, her voice trembling. "Dad's making a scene?" I turned to her, forcing a confident tone I didn't feel. "I'll handle it," I promised. Taking a deep breath, I walked toward where Dad was attempting a wobbly Macarena, laughing uproariously and nearly toppling over with each move. He looked like he didn't have a care in the world, or a shred of self-awareness. "Dad," I said, keeping my tone as calm as possible, "let's step outside for some fresh air." "Nonsense," he slurred, waving me off dramatically. "I'm celebrating my baby girl's big day." He attempted a clumsy twirl and nearly crashed into a nearby table. Before I could steady him, Julie materialized at his side, gripping his arm tightly. "Leave him alone," she snapped, her tone sharp and defensive. "He's just having fun." "This isn't about fun," I replied evenly, though my voice was tight with frustration. "It's about respecting Janet on her special day." Julie's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a sneer. "You think you're so perfect, don't you? Always acting like you're in charge. Like you're better than everyone else." The words hit a nerve. I felt the heat rise in my chest, but I tried to keep my voice steady. "This isn't about me. It's about Janet. She deserves better than this circus." The argument escalated quickly, and in an effort to keep things from blowing up in the middle of the reception, I motioned for us to step into a quieter corner. But our voices rose with each exchange, the tension between us boiling over. "You don't know anything about our family," I spat, my patience fraying as I stared her down. Julie's face darkened. "I know one thing," she hissed. "Your daddy prefers my company over yours." The words hit like a slap. Something inside me snapped. "Oh, really?" I shot back, my voice trembling with anger. "Is that before or after you drained him of his money, Julie?" Her face twisted with fury, and before I had time to process what was happening, she lunged at me. In one swift motion, she yanked off her heeled sandal and swung it at my head. Time seemed to slow as I felt the sharp impact of the heel connecting with my temple. Pain radiated through my skull, and everything around me erupted into chaos. Guests screamed and scattered, chairs overturned, and the room filled with panicked shouts and gasps. Through the haze of pain and confusion, I could only think of Janet. How had it come to this? I had promised to protect her happiness, yet here we were, her wedding day spiraling into a nightmare. I caught sight of Janet's horrified face in the crowd. Patrick held her back, his arms wrapped protectively around her as she sobbed, frozen in disbelief. My heart shattered at the sight, knowing this was supposed to be her perfect day, and it was anything but. Security rushed in, grabbing Julie and pulling her away as she thrashed and screamed obscenities at anyone within earshot. Her wild shrieks echoed through the venue, adding to the chaos. I stood there, dazed, clutching the side of my head, feeling the sting of tears and the throbbing pain from the blow. Around me, the once joyous reception was now a blur of scattered guests, toppled decorations, and shocked whispers. It was supposed to be a day of celebration, a memory Janet would cherish forever. Instead, it had turned into a nightmare none of us would forget. I stood frozen in place as the police arrived, their flashing lights casting an eerie glow over what was supposed to have been a magical evening. Julie was led away in handcuffs, her defiant screams echoing in the night. In that brief moment, I caught a glimpse of Dad. He looked completely lost, his face etched with confusion and pain. For the first time, I realized things would never be the same. The days after the wedding were a blur. Between filing police reports, giving interviews, and enduring countless sleepless nights, I felt like I was living in a nightmare that wouldn't end. Every sound made me jump, and the image of Julie lunging at me with her sandal replayed in my mind over and over like a cruel, unrelenting loop. Aaron, my rock through everything, held me close whenever the nightmares hit. "You're safe now, Deborah," he'd whisper, his voice calm and soothing. But no matter how many times he said it, feeling safe seemed impossible. How could I, when my own father's girlfriend had attacked me at my sister's wedding? How do you even begin to heal from something like that? Janet, understandably, was a wreck. When I visited her about a week later, she looked like a shell of herself. Her once bright eyes were dull, and she couldn't even meet my gaze. "All those months of planning," she said, her voice heavy with sorrow. "And for what? My wedding will always be remembered as the day someone tried to hurt my sister." "Janet, I'm so sorry," I began, the guilt weighing heavily on me. I had promised to protect her happiness, and I had failed. She shook her head, cutting me off. "I know it's not your fault, Deborah. But still, I can't help feeling like our family is cursed or something." While Janet was drowning in her own pain, Dad was living in complete denial. He called me constantly, leaving voicemails that made my blood boil. "Deborah, sweetie, let's not blow this out of proportion," one message began. Julie was just upset. She didn't mean any harm. Hearing him defend her like that after everything she had done made my stomach churn with anger. How could he excuse her actions? How could he still be on her side? The final straw came a few days later when Dad showed up at my apartment, reeking of alcohol. I opened the door to find him swaying slightly, his eyes glassy and unfocused. "Dad, you need to leave," I said, my voice as steady as I could manage. "But Pumpkin, we're family," he slurred, his tone pitiful. "We need to stick together." Something hardened inside me as I looked at him, this broken, unrecognizable version of the man who had once been my father. "No, Dad," I said firmly. "We're done. I can't do this anymore." The hurt in his eyes almost made me waver. Almost. But as I closed the door in his face, I knew I had made the right decision. Some wounds couldn't heal if I kept reopening them. Meanwhile, Christina, my ever-determined best friend, had taken it upon herself to dig into Julie's past. One evening, she called me over to her apartment, her voice tinged with urgency. When I arrived, she spread a pile of papers across her coffee table. "Deborah, look at this," she said, her tone grim. "Julie's got a record. Assault, fraud, theft, you name it." I stared at the papers in disbelief, my mind reeling. There it was, in black and white, proof of everything I had suspected but never had the courage to voice. Julie wasn't just toxic, she was dangerous. I scanned the documents, each page twisting my stomach tighter with a sickening realization. How could Dad not know about this? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Christina hesitated, her lips pressed tightly together. Then she sighed. "That's the thing, Deborah," she said, her tone heavy. "I think he did know." The truth hit me like a ton of bricks. I stared at her, willing her to say she was wrong. But she wasn't. The evidence was right in front of me. Joint bank accounts, suspicious money transfers, and other financial red flags. It wasn't just that Dad had been manipulated by Julie. He had participated. He wasn't just a victim. He was an accomplice. Telling Janet what we had discovered was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. We sat together in her small, cozy kitchen, the unopened wedding gifts stacked in the corner like relics of a dream turned sour. "I can't believe it," Janet whispered, tears streaming down her face. "How could he do this to us? How could he let her?" She trailed off, shaking her head. "I don't even know him anymore." I reached for her hand, my heart aching for her. "I don't know who Dad is either," I admitted softly. "But right now, we need to protect ourselves. We can't let this pull us down." Janet looked up at me, her tear-streaked face hardening with resolve. "I'm with you, Deborah. Always." Her determination gave me strength, but it didn't erase the guilt that clung to me. By exposing Dad's crimes, I had effectively destroyed whatever was left of his life. Yet deep down, I knew I wasn't the one who had ruined him. He had done that all on his own. The mix of anger, confusion, and guilt became too much to handle on my own, so I decided to get help. That's how I found myself sitting in a therapist's office for the first time, trying to make sense of the mess my life had become. "It's normal to feel conflicted," my therapist, Dr. Frank, reassured me during one of our sessions. Her voice was calm and steady, like an anchor in the storm of my emotions. "You've been through something traumatic. You're grieving the loss of the father you thought you knew." I stared at my hands, feeling the sting of tears I wasn't ready to shed. "But shouldn't I hate him? After everything he's done?" "There's no should when it comes to emotions," she said gently. "What's important is that you acknowledge how you feel and give yourself the space to work through it." Working through it sounded simple when she said it, but it wasn't. The pain, anger, and betrayal didn't disappear overnight. But as I left her office that day, I felt a tiny flicker of hope. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Maybe, just maybe, I could rebuild something good from the ruins of my family's past. 5 months after the wedding disaster, I found myself in a place I never thought I'd be: happy. Despite everything that had happened, I realized I was surrounded by love and support. Janet, Erin, Christina, and I had become an unbreakable team. Our shared pain had forged a bond stronger than ever before. One night, the 4 of us were gathered around my dining table, sharing dinner and laughter. The apartment was filled with warmth, the kind of joy I had once feared I'd lost forever. Janet raised her glass, a small but genuine smile lighting up her face. "To new beginnings," she said, her voice steady with hope. "And to family, the one we choose." We clinked glasses, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel broken. I felt whole. In that moment, I knew that no matter what the future held, I had the strength to face it, and I had my chosen family by my side. I raised my glass, clinking it with my sisters, a smile tugging at my lips. The toast felt like a symbolic closing of one chapter and the start of another. But as Janet and I shared a moment of calm, the storm surrounding Julie's trial raged on, drawing the attention of every media outlet in town. The courtroom had become a circus, and sitting there day after day, my stomach churned as more of Julie's dark history came to light. Dad sat beside me, his face pale and frozen in disbelief as her past crimes were laid bare: fraud, theft, and manipulation stretching back years. Each new revelation was like another dagger to our already wounded family. But the most shocking moment hadn't even arrived yet. Behind the scenes, Christina and I had been working tirelessly to uncover the full extent of Dad's involvement in Julie's schemes. We pored over bank records, emails, and financial transactions, piecing together a picture that was far worse than I'd feared. When our lawyer stood up during the trial, I felt my breath catch in my throat. "Your Honor," he began, his voice clear and steady, "we have documentation proving Jeremy Messing's involvement in Miss Lang's fraudulent activities." The courtroom fell silent, and I heard Dad inhale sharply beside me. I couldn't bring myself to look at him. The truth was finally out. He wasn't just a victim of Julie's manipulation, he had played an active role in her schemes. As the legal drama unfolded, my personal life took a surprising and uplifting turn. One sunny Thursday afternoon, my boss called me into his office. I walked in nervously, unsure of what to expect, but his warm smile immediately set me at ease. Deborah, he said, leaning forward, we've been incredibly impressed with your work. Your resilience and creativity over the past year have been outstanding. I'm happy to let you know we're promoting you to Senior Marketing Director. I stared at him in disbelief. Thank you. I don't even know what to say. You've earned it, he said simply, shaking my hand. The moment I left his office, I pulled out my phone to call Aaron. You won't believe this, I said, my voice trembling with excitement. I got promoted. Aaron's joyful laugh echoed through the line. That's amazing, babe. I'm so proud of you. We need to celebrate tonight. Even amidst all the chaos, there were glimmers of hope and joy. Janet and Patrick, determined to move forward, made a beautiful decision. They decided to renew their vows. This time, it wasn't an elaborate event. It was a small, intimate ceremony in their backyard, with only close friends and family. Second time's the charm, Patrick joked, his warm smile making Janet laugh as they exchanged rings again. Watching them, I felt a deep sense of peace. The wounds from the past weren't gone, but they were healing, slowly but surely. Finally, the day of Julie's sentencing arrived. The courtroom was thick with tension as the judge prepared to deliver the verdict. Sitting there, I reflected on how much had changed since that disastrous wedding day. We had been through so much pain and betrayal, but somehow, we had survived. We had grown stronger. We were moving forward. When the judge called for victim impact statements, I stood up, my hands trembling slightly, but my voice firm. The scars from that night run deep, I began, my gaze steady. But they've made me stronger. What happened shattered parts of my family and left wounds I never thought would heal. Yet, through that pain, I found resilience. I found strength. And I found the family I choose to stand beside me. As I spoke, I could feel the weight lifting from my chest. This was my moment to reclaim control, to stand up not just for myself, but for Janet, for my family, and for the life we were rebuilding. When I finished, the room was silent for a beat before the judge nodded solemnly. Julie received her sentence, and with it came a sense of closure. Walking out of the courthouse that day, I felt the sunlight on my face and realized something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. The storm had passed. We weren't the same as we had been before, but we were stronger. We had found our way back to each other, and together, we were finally ready to embrace the future. I locked eyes with Julie, feeling a surge of strength. This was my moment to reclaim my life, to draw a line between the person I had been and the survivor I had become. I'm here today, I said, my voice steady, not as a victim, but as a survivor. As Julie was led away in handcuffs, I felt an unexpected sense of closure. It was as if the weight of that long, painful chapter was finally being lifted. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe freely. But the real celebration came a month later. Janet, Patrick, Aaron, Christina, and I gathered at my favorite restaurant to celebrate my promotion and everything we had overcome together. The evening was warm and full of light, the kind of night that reminds you life can be good again. To Deborah, Christina said, raising her glass, her smile wide and proud. The strongest person I know. I couldn't let her finish without chiming in. To all of us, I added, lifting my glass and glancing around the table. These were the people who had stood by me through the hardest year of my life, the ones who never let me fall when everything felt like it was crumbling. For proving that family isn't just about blood, but about loyalty and love. We clinked glasses, and the sound of laughter filled the air. As we shared stories, teasing each other and reminiscing about the highs and lows, I felt something shift inside me. I realized how much had changed, not just in my life, but in me. The past year had been like a nightmare, filled with pain, betrayal, and loss. But in a strange way, it had also been a gift. It had shown me who really mattered, taught me how strong I could be, and gave me the courage to cut out the toxicity that had been holding me back. Sitting there, surrounded by people who genuinely cared for me, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. This wasn't the perfect happy ending I had dreamed of as a little girl. It came with scars and memories I wished I could erase. But it was real, and that made it beautiful. For the second time in years, I felt hopeful about the future. I was grateful for the family I had found, the love that surrounded me, and the strength I had discovered within myself. And so, that's where my story ends, or at least this chapter of it. But now, I'm curious. If you were in my shoes, would you have given your father another chance after everything he did? Or would you have kept those boundaries in place like I did? It's a tough decision, and I know many of you have faced similar struggles with toxic family members. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your experiences in the comments. How have you handled difficult family dynamics in your own lives? If my story resonated with you, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more real-life stories and honest conversations about navigating complicated relationships. Together, we can find strength in sharing and maybe even help someone else find their way through the storm.